And then they found that in the blind auditions, more women were picked. And researchers have sort of postulated that the image of first violinists being male was so overwhelming that it colored how you heard the notes, and that female violinists were at a disadvantage simply by being women. Another example I have is from my own childhood. When I was 6 years old, my first grade teacher showed us a picture of the Warren Supreme Court, and she asked us to describe the people in the picture. And at 6 years old, none of us noticed that they were all white men, until we could see a picture from 1981 of that Supreme Court, which contained Sandra Day O'Connor and Justice Thurgood Marshall. And at that point, we had what I would say is the eureka moment, where we realized that judges aren't naturally white and male. And it's that sort of moment that I think is hopeful. Sometimes when I talk about implicit bias, people get really depressed, and they think, well, if we all sort of have this in our heads, how are we going to get over it? And the other research that I should highlight a little bit more is that once you are notified that you're doing this, you can stop. And so what I hope is that judicial nominating commissioners sort of self-analyze a little bit and see whether, when you say the word judge to them, do they picture a white male in the same way that I did when I was 6. And the way that we saw implicit bias in our study was one of the commissioners from Utah said, I think that there are female and minority attorneys who don't apply to us because they think that their diversity is a liability when it is just the opposite. And a commissioner from New Mexico had a very similar story. She said, I think one of the biggest obstacles we have is people think that it would be hopeless to apply, and so they don't. And then she added to that, commissioners sitting on New Mexico's nominating commissions sometimes share those views. Like, they have a very narrow conception of what someone with, quote, judicial material, what that person looks like. And so she was particularly worried about how the commission would view someone who was younger, Native American, and female. And that person might have all of the judicial qualifications, and yet she worried that her commissioners might not actually put that person on the short list. And I think that's the bind of implicit bias, that on the one hand, some of the applicants take themselves out of consideration, and then on top of that, you may have commissioners who discount some of the candidates who don't look like a white male. So when I look at Kansas and I think about what the league can do, one of the really interesting facts that AJS has sort of unearthed is more diverse commissions tend to send out more diverse shortlists to governors. And so I think one of the things that the league can do is volunteer to be on these judicial nominating commissions. If you, it's like you're not there to just nominate women, you're there to expand the pool. And once they get into the pool, they need to stand or fall on their own merits. But just having more recruitment will eventually work its way into having a more diverse bench. And with that, I will close.
David's going to run my PowerPoint for me. Before I begin my remarks, I want to point out something that I wasn't aware of earlier when I was talking about the Kansas Commission on Judicial Performance, is that two of our former members are here as well. Justice Fred Six and Nancy Kindling both served on the commission when it was first created, and they could tell you as much, if not more, about our process as I can. So if you have any additional questions, I invite you to talk to them as well. I don't have their permission to do that. Before I begin talking about our study, I want to tell you a little bit about my organization because it provides some context for conducting this research. The American Judicature Society has been in existence since 1913. We're an organization of lawyers, judges, and citizens, and our mission is to promote the effective administration of justice and increase understanding and public confidence in the courts. One of our founders was one of the architects of merit selection plans in the late 1920s, so it's something that is key to what we do at HAS, is trying to promote the adoption of merit selection systems in new jurisdictions, but also to strengthen the systems that exist. This research was conducted as part of a 2-year project to do just that, to preserve and expand judicial merit selection. One of the arguments that merit selection proponents face is the claim that merit selection reduces opportunities for women and minorities, that you're more likely to get a diverse bench through judicial elections. And so we wanted to explore whether that was actually true. The other thing that, this has already been very eloquently addressed, but we conducted this research because we believe that judicial diversity enhances public trust and confidence in the courts, and that if we can better understand how to get a diverse bench, then we can move toward achieving that. So what we did at the beginning of 2008, we identified all judges on state Supreme Courts, courts of appeals, and major trial courts. So we wouldn't be including magistrate judges or probate judges in a state like Kansas. It would simply be the district court judges. For these judges, we identified their gender, their race or ethnicity, simply whether they were a minority or not. We haven't broken it down into categories. And then we identified a number of characteristics of the state where they serve and the court that they sit on. Most importantly, we identified how the judges were initially selected, because we were particularly interested in seeing if some selection systems, testing the assertion that one selection system is more effective at diversifying the bench than others. We also looked at the qualifications that each court had for serving, in terms of whether they had a minimum age qualification, whether there was a minimum experience requirement as well. We looked at the political affiliation of those who were involved in selecting judges to see if achieved more diversity when one party was in power than another. And we also looked at the context, regions of the country, and particularly the pool of attorneys in that state. How many women and minority attorneys there actually were to choose from, to see what the relationships were. Start off just by pointing out some striking features of the overall data that we collected, keeping in mind that this is less than efficient. Keeping in mind that about 12% of judges nationwide are racial or ethnic minorities. One of the things that we found striking was that even in 2008, there were 6 states that had no minority judges. Another thing that we found interesting was that there were some states that had far greater diversity on their courts than others.